It was the sort of perfect day that felt manufactured, like a set piece in a romantic comedy that had conveniently erased all the complicated, ugly parts of real life. The wrought iron gates of the botanical garden had swung open to reveal a fever dream of pastels, baby pink roses, mint green hydrangeas, and cream-colored lilies cascading from every surface, gossamer ribbons twisted around white columns, and a string quartet played something baroque and expensively pleasant near a marble fountain. This was Cassie's vision of perfection, a scene so pristine and sweet, it seemed impossible for anything sharp or dark to exist within it. The mandatory dress code, specified in looping calligraphy on the heavy invitation, was spring pastel, baby pink, or mint green, no exceptions. I had complied, pulling on a pale pink silk slip dress I'd found on sale. It was the kind of dress that draped nicely over my wasted legs, and made me feel, for a fleeting second, almost pretty despite everything. I'd even managed to twist my hair into soft waves that fell past my shoulders. But then there was the chair. My ultralight carbon fiber wheelchair was matte black. It wasn't a fashion choice. It was a specialized piece of equipment. My legs, my freedom, my independence. It cost $5,000, every single penny scraped together from disability payments, freelance editing gigs, and birthday checks I'd hoarded for 2 years. It weighed only 18 pounds, and moved like a whisper compared to the clunky, gray, hospital-issue model I'd endured after the accident. That chair was my ability to navigate the world without begging for help every 5 minutes. I truly hadn't thought the color would matter. I was wrong about so many things back then, especially concerning my sister. I rolled myself up the accessible ramp, a small blessing. I noted instantly and scanned the crowd for Cassie. She stood near the champagne fountain, a vision in ivory lace that likely cost more than my entire year's worth of essential medical supplies. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless. She was laughing at something Greg, her fiancé, had said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Greg seemed like a genuinely good guy, an architect, soft-spoken, and kind. I'd always wondered what he saw in Cassie, but then again, Cassie had always been a master at crafting her own narrative, showing people only the perfect, harmless version of herself. My heart hammered against my ribs as I wheeled myself through clusters of politely stepping aside guests. Despite everything, the 2 years of icy silence, the way she had subtly rewritten the history of the accident to paint me as the villain I still hoped, foolishly, naively, I still clung to the belief that the girl who used to braid my hair before dance recitals was still hidden somewhere inside the elaborate blonde shell. "Cassie," I called out, my voice bright with forced cheer. She turned. For a fraction of a second, I saw it flicker across her face. Annoyance, disgust, perhaps outright hostility. It was gone instantly, replaced by her magazine-perfect smile. "Celie," she drawled, her smile failing to reach her cold eyes. "You made it. You made it." The phrase hung in the air, weighted with the unspoken implication that she had expected, or perhaps even hoped, I would fail to appear. I swallowed the familiar lump of hurt and extended a small gift box wrapped in vintage rose-patterned paper. Inside were a pair of exquisite vintage pearl earrings. I had searched for weeks through estate sales and antique websites to find them. Years ago, Cassie had confessed her love for vintage pearls, saying they reminded her of Grandma's lost wedding jewelry. To buy them, I had withdrawn money from my emergency medication fund, the one I kept for when insurance inevitably denied coverage for something vital. I had wanted to give her something meaningful, something that whispered, "I still love you," even if you've made it abundantly clear you don't love me back." I waited for a nod, a smile, any flicker of warmth. Cassie took the box, using only 2 fingers, as if handling a piece of trash. She opened it carelessly, glanced at the pearls nestled in tissue paper, and her lip curled. "Second hand," she stated, saying the word like a diagnosis. "It looks old. This doesn't match my Vera Wang dress at all." She dropped the gift box onto a nearby cocktail table without another look, her attention immediately shifting to her phone. My chest tightened, a physical, aching squeeze of disappointment and pain. But, as always, I suppressed the tears for the sake of the family peace my parents always demanded. "Don't rock the boat, silly. Be the bigger person." She didn't mean it that way, except she did. She always did. It was then that Cassie's gaze fell, landing squarely on my wheelchair, and her entire demeanor shifted from dismissive disinterest to outright venomous hostility. "What is that?" she hissed, stepping closer. "My wheelchair," I said slowly, genuinely confused by the sheer hatred in her tone. "That pitch-black chair looks like the Grim Reaper in the Garden of Eden," she whispered, leaning down so only I could hear. Her breath smelled faintly of champagne. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? You couldn't just let me have one perfect day." "Cassie, I didn't. This is my chair. I need it too." But she was already storming away, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the stone path. I watched her make a beeline for a folding table, where linens were stacked. She snatched a spare tablecloth pristine white, of course, and snapped it open like a whip crack. She marched back to me, the cloth billowing dramatically behind her like a cape. "Cover this pile of junk up right now," she commanded, her voice dangerously low. Before I could formulate a response, she tried to drape the tablecloth over my legs, over the chair, as if I were a piece of hideous furniture that didn't fit her aesthetic, as if I were something shameful, something that needed to be hidden from her perfect crowd. For the first time in 2 agonizing years, 2 years of accepting blame for an accident I didn't cause, 2 years of enduring her cold shoulder and her revised version of history, I fought back. I grabbed the tablecloth and pushed it away. "No." Such a small word, carrying such enormous, devastating consequences. Cassie's face immediately went blotchy red, patches spreading across her neck. She yanked the tablecloth back and muttered one final, cruel thing before spinning away. "Ungrateful bitch." The stage was set. The perfect pastel dream had its required black mark, and Cassie was ready to launch her revenge. The confrontation over the black wheelchair left a poisonous cloud hanging over the pastel perfection. I tried to make myself small, tucking the chair's frame as discreetly as possible behind an oversized potted fern. But I knew Cassie wouldn't forget. Her anger wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about control. About my very existence, reminding her and everyone else, so the reality she so desperately wanted to ignore. A photographer, dressed in all black and looking severely out of place amidst the pink and mint, began setting up for the formal family photographs. This was the moment I had dreaded most. Our parents, predictably, materialized at my side. Their faces, masks of forced concern, that barely concealed their deep-seated anxiety about appearances. "Sally dear, we need you closer," Mother chirped, tapping my shoulder. Her hand lingered, not in affection, but to ensure I wasn't doing anything to cause a scene. "Now, this is an important photo. It must be perfect for the album." I understood the drill. The black wheelchair could not be in the photo. It was the visible evidence of everything they had worked so hard to cover up. Cassie, standing center stage beside Greg, caught my eye and gestured curtly towards a small, flimsy banquet chair placed several feet away. It was one of those standard, thin-legged wedding chairs, covered in white satin, utterly devoid of armrests or supportive backs, the antithesis of anything someone with my injury could safely use. "Seely," Cassie announced loudly, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "don't be ridiculous. Come sit with us, properly. The chair will ruin the line of the photograph." The air instantly grew thick with tension. Every eye in the vicinity, from the passing waiters to the curious guests, swiveled to watch the poor disabled sister causing trouble. My face flushed, but this time, the heat was fueled by defiance, not shame. "I can't, Cassie," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I can't safely transfer to that chair, and even if I did, I don't have the core strength to sit upright without support. I'll fall." This was the truth of my T10 spinal cord injury. I was paralyzed from the chest down. Sitting unsupported wasn't a matter of willpower. It was a physical impossibility. Cassie took a step towards me, shedding the last pretense of niceness. Her eyes narrowed to venomous slits. "Oh, please. It's been 2 years. Stop milking it for sympathy, Sally. You are so desperate for attention, you'd ruin my wedding just to make a fuss." She leaned in, her voice now a malicious hiss meant only for me. And she used the word that felt like a surgical knife twisting in my chest. "Cripple." Then, she added, with pure, unadulterated cruelty, "Stop faking it, and stand up." My stomach clenched. I stared at her, seeing for the first time, not my sister, but a monster in a $5,000 lace gown. I tried to tell myself that the rage and frustration of the last 2 years were overwhelming her, but there was no mistaking the malice in her eyes. I had never felt so violated, so publicly dehumanized. I braced myself, my hands gripping the push rims of my chair, preparing to launch a full-throated defense or, perhaps just retreat, but I was too slow. In a swift, startling motion that betrayed her supposed grace, Cassie reached out. She grabbed the fabric of my pink silk dress, just above my armpit, where the straps met the bodice. Her grip was brutal and sudden. Before I could even shout a warning, she yanked. Violently, upwards, and sideways. The movement was too quick, too aggressive. I had zero stability. My torso, having no control below the point of her grip, immediately went limp. My center of gravity was thrown off the rails, and I felt myself pitching forward and to the side, completely detached from the safety of the black chair. The next few seconds stretched into a horrifying eternity. I heard a chorus of gasps, but the dominant sound was the sickening thud of my body hitting the ground, followed instantly by a sound that defined the entire catastrophe, the sound of the shimmering, towering champagne centerpiece being obliterated. The champagne tower, 7 tiers high, was directly in my path. I hit the pedestal, and the delicate structure above me instantly surrendered to physics. Hundreds of coupe glasses, filled to the brim with expensive, bubbly rose, simultaneously exploded. I felt the spray of chilled wine, the sting of countless sharp glass shards, raining down on my head and exposed skin. It was an overwhelming, grotesque sensation, like bathing in an icy, destructive shower. I lay sprawled on the pristine white tile, surrounded by glittering, jagged pieces of glass and sticky pinkish-red champagne. It looked like a battlefield, stained with something that could have been blood. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, paralyzed by the pain and the surreal devastation. I was conscious enough to register the chaos, the silence, the gasps, the squeak of shoes on wet stone, the horrified whispers. Then, piercing through the fog of shock, I heard her voice, hysterical, screeching, high-pitched. Cassie was standing over me, but she wasn't asking if I was alive or hurt. "Oh my God, my dress, it's ruined. That stain is never coming out. That was $5,000. I lay there, chest heaving, the metallic temps of blood mixing with the cloying sweetness of the sparkling wine on my tongue, and realized the chilling, devastating truth. I could have broken my neck all over again. I could have died. And her only thought, was for the cost of her stupid, perfect dress. In that moment, the last fragment of my hope for her shattered, joining the hundreds of glass shards around my head. The air smelled of sweet, fermented grapes and copper. I lay on the cold, hard tile, my body throbbing with a sickening resonance that had nothing to do with my paralysis, but everything to do with the impact. Every sound, Cassie's hysterical wailing about her dress, Mother's panicked whispers to the crowd. The crunch of glass under someone's shoe was amplified, assaulting my ears. I couldn't move, partly from the fear of exacerbating a new injury, but mostly from a profound, immobilizing emotional exhaustion. Then, a new voice cut through the noise. It was authoritative, precise, and entirely free of the saccharine panic that had gripped the others. "Clear the area. Someone stabilize her head and neck immediately." A heavy designer handbag, I remember, noting the deep crimson color, was tossed aside, and then a pair of hands, strong and surprisingly gentle, cupped my face and stabilized my skull. The touch was practiced, confident, and professional. The hands didn't fumble or hover. They simply took control. I managed to open my eyes a sliver. Hovering above me was a woman with severe, silver-streaked hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were assessing me with frightening clinical detachment. She was wearing an elegant teal suit, but her demeanor was all operating room. "I need a complete description of the mechanism of injury," she commanded, not to Cassie, but to the surrounding guests. "Did she fall, or was she pushed?" Before anyone could stammer a lie, Greg, Cassie's fiancé, stood nearby, pale and horrified. "Aunt Helena," he whispered. "I think Cassie pulled her out of the chair." The woman, Aunt Helena, didn't flinch. She simply barked an order at Greg. "Call emergency services now. Report a confirmed spinal cord injury patient who has suffered a serious fall involving public assault. Emphasize the possibility of secondary cervical trauma. Do it now. Public assault." The words hit me harder than the fall. Someone was finally calling Cassie's violence what it was. Cassie, sensing her narrative collapsing, rushed forward, tears of self-pity streaming down her face. "Dr. Kingsley, please. It was an accident. Sally is always so clumsy. She's just being dramatic. She does this for attention." Aunt Helena. Dr. Helena Kingsley rose slowly to her full, imposing height. She turned her intense gaze upon Cassie, and the air temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "Cassandra," the doctor said, her voice like ice splintering, "you will be silent." She didn't use an honorific, only the full, formal name, delivered with utter contempt. She then turned her focus to the stunned, silent crowd, transforming the engagement party into a courtroom. "I am Dr. Helena Kingsley, Chief of Neurosurgery at Metropolitan General," she announced, her voice booming over the sound system's sudden feedback. "And let me assure you, this is not an act for attention." She pointed directly at my prone, blood-flecked body. I am the one who personally drilled 8 pedicle screws into this young woman's T10 and T11 vertebrae 2 years ago. I performed the emergency spinal fusion surgery that saved her from complete paralysis above the waist. I know her injury, her prognosis, and her physical limitations intimately. The silence was deafening. Every lie Cassie had spun for 2 years about me exaggerating my condition, about me being just a little injured or faking it for sympathy, was instantly vaporized by the sheer, unassailable weight of medical authority. Dr. Kingsley didn't just stabilize my body. She stabilized the truth. Cassie's face turned from red to a terrifying, mottled white. She started babbling something about family loyalty and misunderstanding. But the final nail in her coffin came from the sidelines. A quiet man in a dark gray suit, who had been standing near the entrance, stepped forward and addressed a police officer who had just arrived with the first responders. "Officer," the man said calmly, his testimony clear and concise. "My name is Lucas Chambers. I am an independent witness. I saw the entire thing." The young woman was sitting peacefully. The blonde woman, Miss Cassie, approached her, called her a derogatory name, and then deliberately, aggressively, and violently pulled her out of the chair and into the champagne tower. The detail in his description, the use of deliberately and aggressively, made the truth irrefutable. It was the moment the event moved from an unfortunate accident to a criminal offense. I closed my eyes, a single tear cutting a path through the grime and wine on my cheek, not of pain, but of profound relief. I was seen. I was believed. The paramedics began their careful, slow work of fitting a cervical collar around my neck and placing me on a hard backboard. Meanwhile, 2 officers approached Cassie. Her protests were shrill and desperate, filled with accusations of bias and fabrication. She kept insisting she was the victim, her perfect day ruined by the ungrateful cripple. I watched, numb but completely vindicated, as the officers gently but firmly took her arms. The silver handcuffs clicked into place, the sound a stark, metallic contrast to the gentle music that had long since stopped. They led her past the broken champagne tower, past the horrified guests, and past my mother and father, who stood frozen, their faces etched with the agonizing realization that they couldn't control this outcome. As the squad car sirens wailed softly in the distance, carrying Cassie away, Dr. Kingsley leaned over the gurney. She didn't offer sympathy, but a firm promise. "You're going to be fine, Sally. I will personally oversee your imaging. And don't worry about her. We have all the evidence we need." I couldn't speak, but I met her gaze, a deep gratitude swelling in my chest. In the middle of my family's betrayal, a powerful, unexpected ally had appeared, an angel of justice in an expensive teal suit. For the first time since the accident, I felt truly safe, and the long, painful road to recovery had abruptly become a road to reckoning. My hospital room was sterile, quiet, and thankfully, completely pastel-free. After the chaos of the engagement party, this quiet isolation felt like a sanctuary. A necessary reset button after having my reality validated and nearly broken on a champagne-soaked marble floor. Dr. Kingsley had confirmed no new spinal damage, a small miracle. But the bruises and cuts were extensive, physical manifestations of the emotional toll Cassie had inflicted. Greg, Cassie's now very embarrassed and visibly shaken fiancé, was my first visitor. He sat awkwardly by my bedside, clutching a bouquet of brightly colored sunflowers that seemed to apologize for the entire pink and mint event. He didn't offer excuses for Cassie. He offered only deep, painful remorse. "Seely," he began, his voice barely a whisper, I am so sorry, for everything. For what Cassie did. For not seeing it sooner. It was a good start. I looked at him, studying his face for any sign of his family's self-serving arrogance. I found none. I decided, in that moment, to entrust him with the secret that had been crushing me for 2 long years. There's something else you need to know, Greg, I said, my voice raspy. The Jeep accident 2 years ago. The one that caused my T10 injury. He nodded slowly, waiting. I inhaled deeply, letting the truth escape my lips for the first time, without the accompanying fear of my parents' punishment. Cassie was driving, not me. She was texting a friend, showing off her new ring from her previous boyfriend, and didn't see the curve sign. She crashed the car and severed my spine. Greg looked like I had punched him in the stomach. His face drained of color, his jaw dropping open. We were both taken to the emergency room. And before the police could interview me, my parents pulled me aside. I continued, the words now flowing quickly, urgently. They told me that if the truth came out, Cassie would face criminal charges for reckless driving and vehicular assault. They said the insurance company would deny the multi-million-dollar claim for my lifetime care if Cassie was found at fault. They made me lie. They forced me to sign a statement saying I was driving too fast and that I was reckless. They traded my dignity for Cassie's freedom and their financial security. The silence in the room screamed. Greg didn't move for a long minute. When he finally spoke, it wasn't denial, but a defeated acceptance. I can't believe it. But Cassie is capable of convincing herself of anything. He stood up, running a hand through his hair. I have to leave. I need to figure out what kind of life I almost signed up for. He squeezed my hand gently, a gesture of genuine friendship, not pity, before walking out. The real show began an hour later, when my parents arrived. They didn't ask about my diagnosis. They didn't mention the glass shards Dr. Kingsley had picked out of my scalp. They burst into the room, their focus laser-sharp, and terrifyingly unified. Seeley, you have to drop the charges immediately, Father declared. Bypassing the chair Greg had vacated, and standing over me. His voice was tight with urgency. This is getting out of hand, Mother chimed in, twisting her wedding band nervously. The police, the lawyers, the cameras, it's embarrassing. Cassie is suffering enough. You need to tell the district attorney it was just an unfortunate sisterly disagreement. A misunderstanding. You need to think about your family, Father insisted, the old familiar tactic, designed to suffocate my autonomy. Think about the peace in our family, Seeley. You are the bigger person here, you always have been. Just sign whatever forms they need to release Cassie. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a glacial stillness settle over me. This was it. The final, unequivocal demonstration of their loyalty. They saw my life-altering injury, the assault, the public humiliation, and their only concern was saving the person who inflicted the damage. I had given them 2 decades of quiet compliance, always playing the supportive, easygoing daughter, and this was my reward. I turned my head slowly, meeting my father's anxious eyes, then my mother's pleading gaze. I let a vulnerable, helpless expression wash over my face, a performance I knew would disarm them. I can't, Dad, I whispered, sounding fragile and defeated. I really wish I could help Cassie, I do. But Dr. Kingsley called the police right after the incident, and Mr. Chambers gave a full statement of assault. I paused, letting the information sink in, then delivered the final, crippling blow, with the utmost sincerity. My lawyer explained it to me this morning. When an assault is witnessed publicly and a high-profile doctor reports it as felony assault against a vulnerable person, it becomes a state criminal charge. It's not a civil matter between me and Cassie anymore. It's the state versus Cassie. I can't drop the charges even if I wanted to. The decision is entirely out of my hands now. It was a brilliantly executed maneuver. I knew the basics of criminal law, that the state pursues the charge, not the victim, but they didn't. They only understood familial power and manipulation. They exchanged terrified glances, the realization that they couldn't bribe, coerce, or shame me into fixing this disaster dawning on them. The control they had wielded over me for so long had vanished, not because I refused their demands, but because a bureaucratic loophole made my refusal irrelevant. This is unacceptable, Father stammered, completely blindsided. There must be a form, a retraction. I am sorry, I said again, letting a small, calculated tear slide down my temple. I tried to help. They eventually left in a flurry of frustrated phone calls and whispered accusations, their perfect retirement plans already beginning to unravel under the shadow of Cassie's criminal trial. As the door clicked shut behind them, I stopped pretending to be defeated. A cold, hard smile touched my lips. The guilt I should have felt was absent, replaced by a profound, invigorating sense of freedom. The peace they valued above me was shattered, and this time, it was permanent. The reckoning had begun, and I was finally driving my own fate. The legal process, stripped of the emotional theater of the engagement party, was swift and cold. Cassie's lawyer knew the evidence was insurmountable. The neurosurgeon's testimony, the impartial witness, and the fact that the assault victim was a person with a significant, pre-existing disability. There was no room for maneuvering, no sympathetic jury to sway. After just 3 weeks of quiet deliberation behind closed doors, a plea deal was struck. My lawyer, a sharp, formidable woman named Ms. Chen, visited me with the final details. They took the deal, Seeley, she announced, her expression grimly satisfied. Cassie pleaded guilty to a lesser felony charge of aggravated assault. She avoids a maximum sentence, but the trade-off is painful for the family. I waited, my heart beating a steady, detached rhythm. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, which, in this context, translated directly into independence. She will serve 2 years in a minimum security facility, Ms. Chen continued, reviewing her notes. And, this is the key, they must pay full restitution immediately. The amount calculated for emotional distress, the medical costs associated with the fall, and 2 years of lost income, is $420,000. $420,000. The number hung in the air, vast and absolute. It was the precise financial measure of Cassie's 2 catastrophic actions. The texting while driving, and the assault at the party, all rolled into one devastating invoice. It was the price of their complicity, the payment for the life they had compromised. My parents arrived an hour after the news broke, not in fury, but in a state of frantic, sputtering distress. They had fought the payment bitterly, their own lawyer failing to negotiate the number down by even a dime. Sally, you have to talk to your lawyer, Father pleaded. Sinking onto the edge of the guest chair, suddenly looking 5 years older. This amount is absurd. It's unfair. We can't afford this, Mother whispered, wringing her hands until her knuckles were white. Her voice trembled, not with concern for me, but with genuine panic for herself. You know your father's business has been struggling. This will wipe out everything. Our retirement, the house fund it, will all be gone. I looked at them, observing their genuine despair, and felt nothing. No pity, no guilt, no desire to soften the blow. The well of emotion they had drained dry 2 years ago remained empty. My lawyer explained it to me, I said, my voice calm and dispassionate, quoting Ms. Chen's briefing. This restitution is non-negotiable. It is part of the criminal plea agreement. If they don't pay in full, Cassie will face the maximum sentence. But, Sally, the interest alone on pulling the money out, father groaned, burying his face in his hands. Will be set back to decades. We'll have to sell the boat, liquidate the college fund we set aside for Cassie's non-existent master's degree. I took a slow breath, making sure my next words were surgical in their precision. Yes, father, the boat must go. The one you bought after the accident to distress, and your individual retirement accounts. The ones you protected when you convinced me to lie about who was driving. Those must be cashed out immediately, incurring the penalties. I continued, the words dropping like polished stones. You will also need to take out a high-interest home equity loan on the house. You can't wait. The money has to be transferred this week, or Cassie risks the deal being revoked. I watched them recoil, physically shrinking under the weight of my cold resolution. They were used to negotiating my compliance, not dismantling their own financial fortress at my command. The shock in their eyes was the realization that I wasn't their subordinate daughter anymore. I was the financial executioner, wielding the state's power. Mother started to cry, real, ugly tears this time. Tears for her lost luxury, not her wounded daughter. How can you do this to us? After everything we've done for you. You traded my life for $420,000 worth of insurance money and family reputation, I pointed out, my voice flat. This is simply the payment, Mother. It is the cost of protecting Cassie from the consequences of her actions. It is the fee for my paralysis. It is the expense of my dignity. The next few days were a flurry of emergency bank appointments, real estate listings, and tense phone calls with their lawyer. They paid. They sold the boat, emptied their accounts, and secured the loan. My lawyer confirmed the wire transfer. $420,000, clean and clear, deposited into my trust fund. The moment that money cleared, the physical tension that had been locked in my chest for 2 years finally dissolved. Cassie was gone, facing her consequences. My parents were financially crippled, facing the truth of their misplaced priorities. And I was free. Not just physically free to leave the hospital, but financially free from their control. The money wasn't a windfall. It was a powerful, practical tool. It was the first step toward a future that was solely, definitively, mine. It meant I could pursue opportunities they would never have allowed, and it meant I could finally, truly, leave them all behind. The finality of the court's decision was its most satisfying element. Cassie was gone, serving her 2-year sentence, the full $420,000, resting securely in my accounts. My parents sent exactly one pleading, manipulative email, demanding I transfer a portion of the funds back to help them manage their catastrophic new debts. I simply archived it. I changed my number, blocked their email addresses, and instructed the property manager of my new building to deny them access. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of possibility. A vast, clear canvas where their influence no longer cast a shadow. That money, that tangible embodiment of their negligence, wasn't a punishment for them. It was a future for me. The first thing I did was wipe out the mountains of medical debt that had accumulated over the past 24 months. The constant Demoralizing calls from collection agencies vanished overnight. Next, I secured a lease on a fully accessible apartment downtown. One with wide doorways, low counters, and a roll-in shower that finally granted me total privacy and independence. Leaving the house I grew up in, a house perpetually tainted by my parents' selective sight, felt like shedding an incredibly heavy skin. The real investment, however, was in the experimental treatment. Before the assault, that kind of therapy, the innovative neural chip implantation in Zurich, was a distant, impossible dream, something only celebrities or lottery winners could afford. Now, it was a tangible goal. The funds were secured, the appointments scheduled, and within 6 months of Cassie's sentencing, I was flying across the ocean, my small team of new caretakers and myself, pursuing the scientific leap I needed. It was in Switzerland that I found my true family. Mari, a patient 2 rooms down from mine, had a T11 injury from a skiing accident 5 years prior. She was a whirlwind of dark humor, relentless optimism, and practical advice. We bonded over the shared agony of physical therapy and the mutual visceral understanding of what it meant to fight for every millimeter of movement. She taught me how to navigate the city's tricky cobblestones in my chair and, more importantly, how to laugh again without feeling like I was betraying the seriousness of my condition. She became the sister Cassie had never been: loyal, compassionate, and present. The surgery itself was complex and frightening, but the aftermath was the true test. Weeks turned into months of grueling physical therapy, working the connections between the chip and my dormant nerves. I fought through sweat, tears, and discouragement, often collapsing into bed feeling utterly defeated. Then came the day, 3 weeks post-operation, on a gloriously sunny afternoon in a small park overlooking Lake Zurich. I was sitting quietly, watching Mari expertly manage a remote-controlled drone, trying to focus on anything but the dull ache in my inert lower half. I felt it first as a phantom tingle, a sudden, almost electric buzzing beneath the skin of my right foot. I dismissed it as fatigue, a nerve misfiring. I waited a full minute, holding my breath, telling myself I was imagining it. Then, I focused every single ounce of my will, my hope, and my relentless determination into that feeling. I visualized the signal traveling from my brain, past the surgery site, through the new pathways, all the way to the extremity, and then, it happened. A tiny, deliberate contraction. My right big toe twitched. It was not a spasm. It was movement. It was the most beautiful, miraculous, earth-shattering tremor I had ever experienced. It was the physical manifestation of hope, the definitive proof that the suffering, the assault, the $420,000, and the years of painful struggle, had bought me something far more valuable than revenge: choice. I had chosen to heal, and my body was finally responding. I let out a choked sob that was instantly swallowed by a joyous, breathless laugh. I looked over at Mari, tears streaming down my face, and pointed frantically at my foot. She instantly understood. A few days later, a final email slipped past my spam filters. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line, Cassie, made my hands shake. I opened it. It was a handwritten apology, transcribed into an image file. She wrote about her time in the facility, her mandated therapy, and the realization of her deep cruelty. She mentioned that she was now out, working as a server in a diner, trying to rebuild her life. I read the words. I am so truly sorry, Celie. I ruined everything. I hope you can forgive me one day. I looked at the message, then out the window at the distant, snow-capped peaks. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. no resentment, no desire for closure. Cassie was simply a memory now, a bitter footnote in the prologue of my life. I realized that my freedom wasn't contingent on her forgiveness or my capacity to offer it. My life was defined by my present and my future. With a shrug that felt genuinely light, I deleted the email, letting the digital words vanish into the ether. I focused instead on the warm sun on my face and the incredible, thrilling sensation of wiggling my right big toe again. The black wheelchair was no longer a marker of tragedy. It was the vehicle that had carried me to this new beginning, rolling forward, finally, under my own direction.